Now, I want to talk about the catalyst for like clearing away the mud. So, what is that catalyst? It's actually surrender. And it's kind of like often I say surrender and people kind of freak out. They're like, whoa, that feels scary. That feels like I'm giving up hope or I'm giving up control and in a certain extent you actually are giving up control, and it's so powerful to surrender because it kind of shifts us out of that egoic like thought pattern of like doing and controlling life, achieving, like trying to manage outcomes, like resisting life, which our default is to spend a lot of time and mental energy resisting life. It's like we have like 1 second where everything's going well and the ego can finally relax and it's like, oh, things are finally going my way. And then what happens 5 seconds later, it's like, wham, you get hit by some circumstance in life and the ego's like up in arms again. So to live a life of surrender is so powerful because you're actually aligning with life itself. You're not fighting life anymore. You're aligning with your higher self. Your ego is not in the driver's seat anymore. And what happens is you begin to use your power of will for the natural evolutionary healing process or the divine, and that's distinct from using your power of will to kind of like fight life and like try to navigate and control and all kinds of things. And what happens is when you surrender, it's like the universe kind of really starts to conspire in your favor. Like life transforms from being the struggle or this kind of like swimming upstream to just becoming like you're floating downstream on like one of those like balloons, and you've got a drink in your hand, and like life's like becomes really easy, and you achieve this kind of like flow state and this sense of freedom and this sense of peace. And like it's like any muscle, the more you practice, the easier this becomes to surrender to life, and then things just start to come your way. When we're in a relaxed state, it's like opportunities, people, jobs, money, like things just kind of start flowing. And so this is because surrender is antithetical to the ego because the ego wants control. It's always like gripping, striving, fighting, struggling, like all throughout our days. Like if you start to pay attention to your mind, like much of our day is just like struggling with life, struggling with circumstances, especially when you have a lot going on. And so the unconditional opening to the divine is the way to loosen the ego's grip. And it's less important what your spiritual beliefs are here, as long as you believe there's something happening, like there's something bigger, there's some spiritual force, higher power, whatever it might be. Like even if it's just those moments of beauty of absorbing a sunset, like that sense of like the something larger, and that's all you need to do is just release your grip and allow that divine force to start to operate through your life. So instead of fighting life, you become one with life. You align with life. You align with your greater purpose, with your divine nature, with your true self. And that's where things start to really shift into kind of a flow. And this is so important. This can't be skipped. I'm just going to be honest with you. If you're unwilling to go through this process of surrendering to life, surrendering to the divine, there's not a lot of hope for things to change. It's because I don't know of any other way to loosen the grip of the ego. And this is why I start here in this program, because it's so important. So, and when we do this, it's like life can also speed up. The pace at which things happens a lot faster. And it can feel really scary. Like the ego won't like this because the ego is driven in fear, and it's driven by fear and control. So it feels very threatened by this idea of kind of like letting go of control and being a yes to life and surrendering, because it will almost absolutely involve something new, and it's scary. If we're really honest, like new, like the unknown, uncertainty can be a little uncomfortable, especially for the ego. It's like we might be miserable, but at least we know at least we know what life looks like and things like that. And this is so important. You got to start to tell the truth. Like we cling to our misery. It's like, Soren Kierkegaard said, we settle for a level of despair we can tolerate and call it happiness. We settle for a level of despair we can tolerate and call it happiness. And that's the human experience, for many of us. And if we have the courage to tell the truth, it's like, yeah, I kind of do. I kind of just settle for what I know and what feels comfortable, and like maybe I'll grow a little here and there, but I'm talking about like top to bottom transformation. And this happens through surrender, through our willingness to just let go, to have new things happen. Because what happens is new thought patterns, new beliefs, and with that comes a completely new experience of life. And that process can't really happen when we're fighting it, when we're in the way of it. And this is why surrender is so important, to allow us to just kind of like have this force begin to move through us and to evolve us, which is what naturally wants to happen. Our soul naturally wants to evolve. We want to go through this process of lightening the density of the ego body and to become more radiant, and to become more relaxed and to become more joyful and to become more peaceful. And so none of this can really happen as long as we're attempting that control. And this is why the surrender is so important. It's the first step. So I wanted you to think of surrender as an orientation of the heart. So like it's when something happens in life, the tendency is to close off the heart. Brain starts to get really busy thinking about how to fix it or whatever. But it's a releasing or relaxing, or like kind of an undoing. It's like okay, here it is, life. Like I open my heart to what comes with my life, like what comes at me. And like I said, without it, there isn't very much room for anything new to happen. And what we're about in this program is newness, transformation, new thoughts, new beliefs, new ways of being, a new life, a completely new life. And so we can't do it without that willingness to completely surrender everything all the time. Completely surrender everything all the time. You can, maybe you're having maybe your ego's having a little bit of a reaction here to this, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. It takes courage. This work takes courage. It really does. There's no way about it. So I want to just share. Well, actually, before I do that, I want you to take a moment and try to think of this. Is there anything you can actually control in life? Like, if you're telling the truth, do you have any real control? Like, we might have influence, but we don't have control over life, and we never have. It's just this kind of illusion that the ego wants to believe we have control, but we really don't. And once we tell the truth and discover this, we have a less attachment to things. Like, there are ties to life kind of just like begin to disappear, and we become free. Like, we become happy and kind of like almost like untouchable. Life can happen, but we're not in a struggle with it. It's like we're in a graceful dance with it. So I just want to share my experience of surrender. It was the first time I kind of really did this. I'll never forget. It was like December 2007, and I had been doing some forgiveness work, and I felt brave. Like, I felt ready to be like, you know what? God, I don't know if you exist, but if you do, you're welcome to come into my life and do your thing. And immediately, like, everything changed. Like, within a month, I got a full scholarship at school, which was like $100,000. And to give you a sense of how rare this was, it only went to like 6 out of like 3,000 students in a class. So it was like 0.02%. It was like, this is never going to happen anyway. But it completely transformed my experience, because it forced me to receive just like the abundance of life, and like everything shifted. I started I took a meditation class and started to have these incredibly deep, potent experiences in meditation, like spiritual experiences. Like, my energy was shifting. And then a few months later, I went to my first transformational training, which is where I just fell in love with coaching, because my life was changed. Like, in the course of a single weekend, I became a different human being. And I went from there to rehab, because at the time I was realizing I was addicted to prescription pills and alcohol, and all this stuff rapidly changed. And then I used some of the additional scholarship money to backpack around Southeast Asia for 3 months, and like just spend time, out in nature and doing meditation retreats. And all this happened within 1 year. It was like unbelievable. It was like the year of the greatest miracles. And it's not a coincidence that I began by surrendering, and that's why this is so important.